The air inside Ophidion's coil was stale and cold, carrying the sour tang of rusted metal and abandoned hopes. Kalen Vance pulled his tattered jacket tighter around his broad shoulders as he moved deeper into the derelict space station. His boots echoed against metal grating, each step punctuated by the distant drip of condensation from leaking pipes. "Disgusting," he muttered, sweeping his flashlight across the corridor. The beam caught on patches of strange fungal growth that pulsed with bioluminescence, casting eerie blue shadows against the walls. This far from regulated space, stations like Ophidion's coil festered with all manner of biological contaminants. The station creaked around him, a massive serpentine structure twisting through the void. Once a bustling transfer hub at the edge of Alliance territory, Ophidion's coil had been abandoned after a series of mysterious disappearances and whispers of temporal anomalies. Most wise spacers avoided it completely, which made it the perfect place for salvage operators like Kalen to find valuable tech, and the perfect place for people with secrets to hide. Kalen checked his wrist display, squinting at the station schematics. If the intel was correct, the central data core should be just ahead. The contract was simple enough. Retrieve the corrupted data core, don't ask questions about what might be stored inside it, get paid. The kind of straightforward, solitary work he'd sought since leaving the Alliance military 7 years ago. The hallway terminated at a sealed bulkhead door. Kalen pulled a multi-tool from his belt and began working on the control panel, his practiced movements betraying years of experience, breaking into places he wasn't supposed to be. "Come on, you stubborn piece of..." The panel sparked under his fingers, and the bulkhead door shuddered open with a pained groan. Stale air rushed past him as the pressure equalized. Beyond lay the central data processing chamber, a cavernous space filled with towers of hardware. Emergency lighting flickered intermittently, creating a strobe-like effect that made the shadows seem to move. Kalen advanced cautiously, weapon drawn, scanning for automated security systems or scavengers who might have reached the prize before him. His senses, honed by years of military training and salvage runs in dangerous territory, prickled with warning. Something was off about this place. The air felt charged, as if the very molecules were vibrating at a different frequency. "You're getting paranoid in your old age," he muttered to himself, approaching the central data core, a cylindrical structure the size of a small shuttle, its surface covered in blinking lights and connection ports. As he prepared his extraction tools, a whisper of sound from the darkness behind him caused Kalen to spin, weapon raised. "Who's there? Show yourself." For a moment, nothing moved. Then a figure stepped into the fractured light, a woman with short, dark hair streaked with silver, dressed in a patchwork environment suit that had seen better days. Her face was weathered but eerily familiar, with sharp cheekbones and dark, penetrating eyes that widened slightly as she saw him. Kalen felt his blood run cold. It couldn't be. "Lyra." His voice emerged as a hoarse whisper. "You're dead. You died on Cassini Prime." The woman's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Hello, Kalen. It's been a long time. It was impossible." Lyra Kess had been a brilliant researcher assigned to the same classified Alliance mission as Kalen 7 years ago. He'd watched as the research facility erupted in flames after the containment breach. There had been no survivors, or so he'd been told. "How are you?" he began, but stopped when he noticed movement behind her. From the shadows emerged a small figure, a child of perhaps 5 or 6 years. The girl had Lyra's dark hair, but there was something unusual about her eyes. They reflected the emergency lighting with an unnatural luminescence, and they held a depth of awareness that no child should possess. Before Kalen could process what he was seeing, Lyra stepped forward and pushed the child toward him. Instinctively, he holstered his weapon and caught the girl by her thin shoulders. "You saved me years ago," Lyra said, her voice tight with emotion, "and left me with this." In that instant, the station's alarm system erupted into a deafening wail. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and an automated voice crackled over the long-dead announcement system. "Warning! Security breach detected. Containment protocols initiated." Kalen gripped the child's shoulders tighter. What have you done? Lyra's eyes darted toward the entrance. There's no time to explain. They found us. A distant boom echoed through the station, followed by the metallic screech of tearing bulkheads. The girl flinched against Kalen's side. Who's found you? Kalen demanded. The retrieval specialist, Lyra said, pulling something from her pocket, a palm-sized device that she quickly attached to the data core. Alliance Special Operations Division, or what used to be Alliance before Chimera Corporation bought them out. The name struck Kalen like a physical blow. Chimera, the corporation that had funded the research facility on Cassini Prime. The same facility where everything had gone to hell, where he'd abandoned his post and triggered the emergency evacuation protocol that had collapsed half the complex. Lyra's fingers flew over the device's interface. I need 5 minutes to download what we came for. Then we need to run. Kalen stepped back, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. I'm not involved in whatever this is. I'm just here for a salvage job. The child looked up at him with those strange, knowing eyes. You are involved, she said, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. You always have been. A shiver ran down Kalen's spine. Something about the girl's voice seemed to bypass his ears altogether, resonating directly in his mind. Lyra shot a glance at the girl. Alara, help me with this. She turned back to Kalen. The job that brought you here wasn't coincidence. I arranged it. We need your ship and your expertise. The distant sounds of combat grew closer, mechanical whirring mixed with the distinctive crack of plasma rifles. Security drones, Kalen muttered, recognizing the sound. Station's old defense systems must have reactivated. Not just drones, Lyra said grimly. They'll have sent human operatives too. The best they have. Kalen swore under his breath. Whatever was happening, he was now caught in the middle of it. The smart move would be to abandon these two and find another way off the station. But something, curiosity, residual loyalty, or perhaps the weight of old guilt, kept him rooted in place. 5 minutes, you said? Lyra nodded, relief flashing across her face. I'll buy you 3. Then we move. Kalen unholstered his weapon again. Stay here. Keep the kid close. He moved toward the entrance, positioning himself behind a fallen data server that offered some cover. As the sound of mechanical movement grew closer, Kalen allowed old training to take over, pushing aside questions about Lyra's impossible survival and the strange child who watched him with ancient eyes. The first security drone rounded the corner, a spherical unit bristling with sensors and a nasty-looking pulse cannon. Kalen waited until it was fully in the doorway before taking the shot. His plasma round struck the drone's main sensor array, sending it crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. 2 more followed immediately after, and he dispatched them with similar efficiency. But the 4th drone was different, larger, more heavily armored. It absorbed his first 2 shots without slowing and returned fire, sending a pulse of energy that scorched the metal inches from Kalen's head. Time's up, he shouted, ducking back. Lyra, we need to move. Almost done, she called back, her voice tight with concentration. The drone advanced, its weapon powering up for another shot. Kalen prepared to make a desperate run for it when something strange happened. The drone suddenly shuddered and froze in midair, its lights flickering erratically. A moment later, it fell to the ground with a heavy thud, completely inert. Kalen turned to see Alara staring intently at the fallen machine, a thin trickle of blood running from her nostril. The child swayed slightly, and Lyra quickly moved to steady her. I told you not to do that, Lyra whispered urgently, wiping the blood away with her sleeve. We need to go, the girl replied simply. Lyra nodded, removing her device from the data core and securing it in a hidden pocket. We have what we need. Lead the way, Kalen. Still processing what he'd just witnessed, Kalen shook his head to clear it. Questions later. Survival now. This way, he said, pointing to a maintenance shaft in the far wall. It should connect to the docking level. My ship's in Base 17. As they moved through the cramped maintenance shaft, the distant sounds of combat faded behind them. The tight space was barely tall enough for Kalen to stoop through, and his shoulders scraped against the walls with every step. Lyra followed close behind, with Alara sandwiched between them. "Start talking," Kalen said over his shoulder. "What happened on Cassini Prime? How are you alive? And what is she?" He didn't need to specify who she was. Lyra's breathing was labored as she kept pace. Cassini wasn't a military research facility like they told you. It was a genetic engineering lab. Project Chimera. They were trying to enhance human capabilities. Human experimentation, Kalen translated grimly. The Alliance wouldn't. It wasn't the Alliance, not really, Lyra cut in. It was a black ops division funded by private interests. Chimera Corporation. They found something in deep space, alien genetic material or advanced technology. We were never told exactly what it was. They wanted to incorporate it into human subjects. And you were one of the researchers? Lyra was silent for a moment. I was one of the subjects. The implications hit Kalen like a punch to the gut. He remembered Lyra as she'd been then, a brilliant scientist in an Alliance uniform, not a test subject. You were military intelligence, a major, a cover. I volunteered for the program. We all did initially. They promised breakthroughs, the cure for every disease, extended human lifespan, cognitive enhancements beyond our wildest dreams. They reached a junction in the maintenance shaft, and Kalen paused to check his wrist display. "Left here," he directed, leading them down a narrower passage. "What went wrong?" he asked, though he already knew the answer in broad strokes. He'd seen the aftermath. "The enhancements worked," Lyra said quietly. "Too well. Some subjects developed abilities that scared even the researchers. And then there were the side effects, physical degradation, mental instability. They started classifying subjects as either successes or failures. The failures were processed. Killed, Kalen said flatly. Yes, I was scheduled for processing when the containment breach happened. When you happened, Kalen remembered that day with painful clarity. He'd been assigned as security detail, told only that the facility housed sensitive Alliance research. When he discovered what was really happening, seeing the rows of bodies being processed, he'd acted on instinct, triggering an evacuation protocol that had caused explosive decompression in parts of the facility. "I didn't know you survived." "Almost didn't," Lyra said. "The evacuation pod I reached was damaged. Instead of safely ejecting, it was pulled into the facility's experimental phase shift field." Kalen glanced back at her. "The what?" "Another project running parallel to the genetic work. They were experimenting with manipulating time-space. My pod was caught in a temporal distortion. For me, it's been 15 years since Cassini Prime. For you, it's been, what, 7? The maintenance shaft suddenly opened into a wider corridor, and Kalen paused, signaling for silence as he checked for threats. Finding none, he motioned them forward. "And her?" he asked, nodding toward Alara, who had remained unervingly quiet throughout their exchange. "She's what, a test tube baby? Some kind of clone?" Lyra's expression hardened. "She's my daughter. Biologically?" Kalen pressed. "Yes, biologically. Mine, and—" Lyra hesitated. The genetic material they were experimenting with wasn't entirely human. Alara carries those modifications. Kalen looked at the child with new understanding. The unnatural awareness in her eyes, the way she'd apparently disabled the security drone with her mind. "She's what they were trying to create at Cassini Prime. She's more than that," Lyra said fiercely. "She's a person, my child, and they want her. Yes, the temporal distortion hit us for years, but they finally tracked us down. They'll never stop looking for her." They reached the entrance to the docking bay, and Kalen held up a hand, signaling them to wait while he scouted ahead. The bay was large, with slots for a dozen ships, but only his battered transport vessel, affectionately dubbed the Rust Bucket, occupied one of the berths. The ship was an older model Corsair-class transport, modified extensively for salvage operations. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast when it needed to be and had plenty of hidden compartments. "Clear," he called back softly. "My ship's 50 meters ahead. Stay low and move quickly." They made it halfway across the bay floor when the far doors exploded inward. Through the smoke strode 3 figures in sleek black combat armor, weapons raised. These weren't station security drones. Their movements were too fluid, too purposeful. Retrieval specialists, Lyra hissed, pulling Alara behind a cargo container. Kalen dropped to a crouch beside them, assessing their options. The specialists hadn't spotted them yet, but it was only a matter of time. His ship was still 30 meters away, with no cover for the last stretch. "When I start firing, you run," he told Lyra. "Don't stop for anything. The ship's unlocked. Get inside and start the engines. Activation code is 7-3-9 Alpha Zeta." Lyra gripped his arm. "They'll kill you." "Maybe, but they want the kid alive, right? That's our advantage." He checked his weapons charge. "Ready." Lyra nodded grimly, pulling Alara close. The child's eyes met Kalen's, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a strange sensation, like fingers brushing lightly against his consciousness. "Be careful," Alara said softly. Kalen took a deep breath, then rose and fired a rapid series of plasma bolts at the specialists. The bright energy slammed into crates and equipment near them, creating chaos, and forcing them to dive for cover. In the same motion, he darted in the opposite direction from Lyra and Alara, drawing the specialist's attention. "Move," he shouted. Lyra grabbed Alara's hand and ran, keeping low as they sprinted toward the rust bucket. Kalen continued firing, moving from cover to cover, leading the specialists away from the ship. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, close enough that he felt its heat, and he dove behind a refueling station. One of the specialists shouted something, and the other two immediately changed direction, heading toward the ship. They'd spotted Lyra and Alara. Cursing, Kalen broke from cover and fired at the pursuing specialists, managing to hit one in the leg. The specialist stumbled, but didn't fall, the advanced armor absorbing most of the damage. Still, it was enough to draw their attention back to him. Kalen ran, plasma bolts heating the air around him as the specialist returned fire. He reached a stack of fuel canisters and, without hesitation, fired directly into them. The resulting explosion wasn't large, but it created a wall of fire between him and his pursuers. Using the distraction, he sprinted for his ship. Lyra had reached the boarding ramp, pushing Alara ahead of her. But one specialist had circled around and was closing in fast. Lyra saw the threat and shoved Alara the rest of the way inside. "Go," she shouted to the child. The specialist raised his weapon, taking aim at Lyra. Kalen was still too far away to intervene directly. In desperation, he threw his multi-tool with all his strength. The tool struck the specialist's helmet, disrupting his aim just as he fired. The plasma bolt went wide, scorching the hull of the ship instead of hitting Lyra. Kalen reached the ramp moments later, tackling the specialist from behind. They crashed to the floor, grappling for control. The specialist was enhanced, stronger and faster than any normal human should be. His armored fist connected with Kalen's ribs, sending a lance of pain through his chest. Fighting through it, Kalen managed to get a hand on the specialist's weapon. They struggled for control, the barrel swinging wildly between them. With a desperate surge of strength, Kalen forced the weapon up and away, directly under the specialist's chin where the armor was thinnest. He pulled the trigger. The specialist went limp, and Kalen pushed the body away, staggering to his feet. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him up the ramp as plasma bolts from the remaining specialists struck the ship's hull. "Close it," Kalen shouted as they tumbled into the cargo hold. Lyra slammed her palm against the emergency close button, and the ramp began to rise. "The engines?" Kalen asked, wincing as he pressed a hand to his ribs. "Running," Lyra confirmed. "Alara's in the cockpit." Kalen limped toward the front of the ship, Lyra close behind. They found Alara strapped into the co-pilot's seat, her small hands hovering uncertainly over the controls. "Move over, kid," Kalen said, dropping into the pilot's chair. His fingers flew across the console, bypassing safety protocols and routing power directly to the thrust systems. The ship shuddered as its engines flared to life. A warning indicator flashed on the console. The specialists were attempting to override the docking clamps, trapping them in place. "Hold on," Kalen muttered, inputting a series of commands. With a violent lurch, The rust bucket tore free of the docking clamps, ripping away part of the station's exterior in the process. Alarms blared as the ship accelerated away from Ophidion's coil, pushing them all back in their seats. "They're following," Lyra reported, checking the rear sensors. "Two pursuit vessels, high-speed interceptors." "Of course they are," Kalen said grimly. He banked the ship hard, heading for a nearby asteroid field. "Those interceptors are faster than us in open space, but they're not as maneuverable. If we can reach the Tartarus Nebula, we might lose them." "The Tartarus Nebula?" Lyra looked at him in disbelief. "That's a navigation nightmare. Even AI-guided ships avoid it." "Exactly," Kalen said, a reckless grin spreading across his face. "And I know it better than anyone. Used to run contraband through there during the border wars." He pushed the ship harder, feeling the frame vibrate as it approached maximum sustainable velocity. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a chaotic mass of tumbling rocks ranging from the size of a fist to small moons. "Strap in tight," he warned, glancing at Alara. "This is going to get rough." The child nodded solemnly, checking that her harness was secure. There was no fear in her expression, only intense concentration. Kalen plunged the rust bucket into the asteroid field, immediately implementing a series of wild maneuvers that sent them weaving between the massive rocks. Behind them, the pursuit vessels hesitated momentarily before following. "They're still on us," Lyra said, tension evident in her voice. "Not for long," Kalen promised, guiding the ship deeper into the field where the asteroids were larger and more densely packed. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, anticipating the trajectories of the tumbling rocks and finding gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. One of the pursuit vessels clipped an asteroid, sending it spinning. It recovered quickly, but had fallen behind. The second vessel stayed close, its pilot clearly skilled enough to match Kalen's maneuvers. "We need to lose that second ship," Kalen muttered. "There's a cluster of volatile minerals in a large asteroid about 20 clicks ahead. If I can get close enough." The rust bucket shuddered as a plasma bolt from the pursuit vessel struck its rear shields. "Shields at 60%, Lyra reported. Another hit rocked the ship. 40%. Kalen swore, pushing the engines beyond recommended limits. The asteroid he sought appeared ahead, a massive, irregular chunk of rock laced with veins of glowing blue mineral. "What are you planning?" Lyra asked, gripping her seat as the ship lurched violently to avoid another barrage. "Those minerals are highly reactive to energy weapons," Kalen explained, guiding the ship directly toward the asteroid. "If our friend's back there, keep shooting." Understanding dawned on Lyra's face. "You're using us as bait. Got a better idea?" Kalen asked, his eyes never leaving the viewport. The asteroid grew larger, filling their view. Kalen waited until the last possible moment before pulling up sharply, skimming the surface of the massive rock. As expected, the pursuit vessel fired again, but this time its plasma bolts struck the asteroid surface. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. The mineral veins ignited in a chain reaction, causing a series of explosions across the asteroid surface. Fragments erupted outward in all directions, creating a deadly shrapnel cloud. The rust bucket, already moving away, took only minor damage. The pursuit vessel, caught in the expanding debris field, wasn't so fortunate. A large fragment tore through its port engine, sending it spinning out of control into the path of another asteroid. "That's one down," Kalen said with satisfaction. "Now for the Tartarus Nebula." He guided the ship out of the asteroid field toward a distant purple-tinged cloud that distorted the star field behind it. The Tartarus Nebula was infamous for its electromagnetic properties that played havoc with navigation systems and sensor arrays. Most ships avoided it entirely, and those that did venture in rarely came out again. "What about the other pursuit vessel?" Lyra asked. "Damaged, but still functional," Kalen replied, checking the sensors. "It'll follow us in if they're determined enough. And I'm betting they are." The nebula enveloped them gradually, wisps of ionized gas trailing across the viewport before thickening into an impenetrable purple haze. Almost immediately, the ship's navigation systems began to falter, and the sensors showed impossible readings. "Welcome to Tartarus," Kalen said grimly. "From here on, we fly blind." He reduced power to all non-essential systems, relying on manual controls and his own instincts to guide them through the nebula's treacherous currents. The rust bucket shuddered periodically as it passed through denser pockets of charged particles. "How do you know where to go?" Alara asked, speaking for the first time since they'd left the station. Kalen glanced at her, surprised by the question. "I don't exactly, but I know how to read the currents. See those ripples in the gas?" He pointed to subtle patterns visible through the viewport. "They indicate gravitational disturbances. Follow them right, and they lead you through. Follow them wrong, and we end up like that," Lyra finished, gesturing to a ghostly shape visible briefly through a break in the nebula. The hulk of a derelict ship, its hull punctured and frozen crew still visible through the breached viewport. They flew in tense silence for nearly an hour, Kalen making minute adjustments to their course as they penetrated deeper into the nebula. Occasionally, the sensors would flicker to life long enough to confirm that the remaining pursuit vessel was still behind them, though falling steadily further back. "They're not familiar with the nebula," Kalen observed. "They're moving too cautiously." "Is that a bad thing?" Lyra asked dryly. Kalen smiled thinly. "Depends on your perspective. Caution might keep them alive longer, but it won't help them catch us." Eventually, the purple haze began to thin, revealing a small, unremarkable moon orbiting a gas giant at the nebula's edge. The moon's surface was pockmarked with craters and deep canyons, seemingly devoid of life or habitation. "Tethys," Kalen said, "abandoned mining colony. Good place to lay low and make repairs." He guided the ship into the largest canyon, following its winding path until they reached a cavernous opening in the moon's surface, a natural hangar large enough to conceal the rust bucket completely. As the ship settled onto the rocky floor, Kalen finally released his white-knuckled grip on the controls. The silence after the engines powered down was profound. "Your pursuit vessel?" Lyra asked. Kalen checked the sensors, which were functioning normally again now that they were out of the nebula. "Still in there, moving slowly. They'll probably emerge within a few hours, but they won't know which direction we went. We bought some time." He unstrapped from the pilot's seat and stood, wincing as his bruised ribs protested. "Let's assess the damage and see what we're dealing with." While Kalen inspected the ship's exterior for damage, Lyra established a small living area in the cargo hold, using storage crates to create a makeshift table and seats. Alara sat quietly on one of the crates, watching Kalen work with those unervingly perceptive eyes. "Your ribs are fractured," she said when he returned, his face gray with pain. Kalen paused, looking at her curiously. "How would you know that?" "I can see it," she replied simply. "The disruption in your energy field, like ripples in water." Lyra approached with a medkit. "She's right. You need to let me look at that." Too exhausted to argue, Kalen allowed Lyra to help him remove his jacket and shirt. Angry purple bruising spread across his right side where the specialist had struck him. As Lyra applied a pain-numbing gel and began wrapping his torso with a stabilizing bandage, Kalen studied her face. She was older than he remembered, not just the 7 years that had passed for him, but the 15 she claimed to have experienced. Fine lines etched the corners of her eyes, and strands of silver threaded her dark hair. Yet she moved with the same precise efficiency he remembered, her touch clinical but not unkind. "You said you arranged the salvage job," he said. "How? And why me?" Lyra secured the bandage before answering. "I have contacts in the salvage community. When we determined we needed to retrieve data from Ophidion's coil, I made inquiries about who might be suitable. Your name came up." She paused. "I didn't know it was you until I saw the contract had been accepted. By then, it was too late to change plans." "And what exactly did you retrieve from the station?" Kalen asked, nodding toward the device she'd attached to the data core. Lyra glanced at Alara before answering. "Information about Project Chimera. Research data, personnel files, locations of other facilities. I need to understand what was done to me, what's been done to Alara." And find others like you? If they exist, Lyra said quietly. I don't know how many subjects survived Cassini Prime, or what became of them if they did. Kalen pulled his shirt back on, his movements careful. Why come me now? After all these years? Lyra's expression hardened. Because we're running out of options. The temporal distortion that protected us is dissipating. Chimera Corporation has resources we can't match, and they're closing in. We need allies. I'm one man with a salvage ship, Kalen pointed out. Not exactly an army. You were Alliance Special Forces before you became a salvager, Lyra countered. You have contacts, knowledge of secure locations. And most importantly, you've proven yourself willing to act against Chimera once before. Before Kalen could respond, Alara spoke up. There's someone coming. Both adults turned to look at her. The child's expression was distant, as if listening to something they couldn't hear. The specialists? Lyra asked urgently. Alara shook her head. Different. Closer. Someone already on this moon. Kalen reached for his weapon. That's impossible. This place has been abandoned for decades. No, Alara insistive. Someone is here. They know we've arrived. As if confirming her words, the ship's proximity alert chimed softly. Kalen moved to the console, checking the external cameras. A lone figure was approaching the ship on foot, seemingly unconcerned about the potential dangers of a derelict mining colony. She's right, Kalen said, his voice tight. We have company. He magnified the image, revealing a tall, lanky individual in mismatched environmental gear. The figure raised an arm in greeting, clearly aware they were being observed. Do you recognize them? Lyra asked, moving to stand beside him. Kalen shook his head. No, but they're coming right for us, which means they either tracked our approach or... He glanced at Alara. Or they were expecting us, Lyra finished grimly. Stay here, Kalen ordered, checking his weapon's charge. I'll handle this. He descended the boarding ramp cautiously, weapon ready but not raised. A delicate balance between appearing non-threatening and being prepared for trouble. The figure stopped a respectful distance away, hands held open at their sides. Kalen. Vance, the stranger called. The voice was male, with a peculiar lilt that suggested an off-world accent. Long way from your usual routes, aren't you? Kalen tensed. You have me at a disadvantage. The stranger pushed back his hood, revealing a gaunt face with sharp features and a network of fine scars across his left cheek. Dr. Eli Morin. I believe we had a mutual acquaintance in Lyra Kess. The name triggered a distant memory. You were at Cassini Prime, Kalen realized. Won the research team. Dr. Moore nodded. Chief geneticist, though that title means little now. Is Lyra with you? And the child? Kalen's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. Give me one reason why I shouldn't shoot you where you stand, Doctor. Because I've spent the last 7 years sabotaging Chimera Corporation from within, Morin replied calmly. And because I'm likely the only person who can help stabilize the child's condition. Before Kalen could respond, movement behind him announced Lyra's presence. She descended the ramp slowly, Alara half hidden behind her. Eli, she said, her voice cold. You look terrible. Dr. Morin smiled thinly. 15 years in temporal displacement will do that to a person. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Lyra? Something unspoken passed between them, a history Kalen wasn't privy to. Lyra's posture was tense, defensive, but she made no move to retreat. How did you find us? She demanded. I've been monitoring this sector since reports came in about activity at Ophidion's Coil, Morin explained. When a ship emerged from the Tartarus Nebula, a route only a handful of pilots know, I had a hunch. The proximity of this moon to a known temporal anomaly made it a logical destination for someone trying to stay hidden. And how do we know you're not working for Chimera? Kalen asked, his weapon still trained on the doctor. You don't, Morin admitted. But if I were a retrieval specialist, would already be swarming this position. He turned his attention to Alara, who was watching him with unblinking intensity. Hello, Alara. You've grown since I last saw you. The child stepped out from behind Lyra, ignoring her mother's attempt to keep her back. You're afraid, she said simply. Morin's composed expression faltered slightly. Yes, afraid of what Chimera will do if they recapture you. Afraid of what you might become without proper guidance. And what exactly is that? Kalen asked. Something beyond human, Morin said quietly. The next stage in our evolution, if the genetic modifications stabilize properly, or a tragedy waiting to happen if they don't. Lyra stepped forward protectively. She's not an experiment, Eli. She's a child. She's both, Morin replied, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. And she needs help that only I can provide. A tense silence fell. Kalen studied Dr. Morin carefully, searching for signs of deception. The man appeared gaunt, exhausted, his environmental suit patched in multiple places. If he was still working for Chimera, they weren't treating him well. Let's say, I believe you, Kalen said finally, lowering his weapon slightly. What exactly is wrong with the child that needs your help? Dr. Morin glanced at Lyra, who gave a reluctant nod. The genetic modifications are unstable, he explained. Each time Alara uses her abilities, it accelerates cellular degradation. I've been developing a treatment to stabilize the process, but I need specialized equipment that I couldn't bring with me. So you need us to help you get this equipment, Kalen concluded. Yes, there's a research outpost on Vega Minor. Officially abandoned, but I've been maintaining it off the grid. Everything we need is there. Kalen exchanged a look with Lyra. And after that, what's your plan? There are others, Morin said quietly. Other subjects from various Chimera facilities who escaped or were presumed dead. I've been helping them stay hidden, establishing a network. With Alara and Lyra, we might finally have enough evidence to expose Chimera to the Alliance High Command. The Alliance won't help, Kalen said bitterly. They're complicit. Parts of the Alliance are compromised, Morin corrected. But there are still good people in positions of power who would act if they knew the truth. Alara stepped forward again, her strange eyes fixed on Dr. Morin. You're hiding something, she said. The doctor's face paled slightly. I'm not lying, Alara clarified, but not telling everything. Morin sighed, shoulders slumping. The outpost on Vega Minor. Chimera doesn't know about it yet, but they're close to finding it. We need to move quickly. How quickly? Lyra asked sharply. Days, not weeks, Morin admitted, which is why I've arranged transportation. A friend with a faster ship than yours is waiting on the other side of this moon. They can get us to Vega Minor in half the time. Kalen's suspicion flared again. Convenient. Necessary, Morin countered. Your ship is damaged and easily identifiable. The rust bucket is well known in salvage circles, which means Chimera will be looking for it specifically. And your friend? Lyra asked. Can they be trusted? About as much as I can, Morin said with a tight smile. Which I realize isn't saying much from your perspective. But we're all taking risks here. Kalen considered their options. The rust bucket had taken damage during their escape, and repairs would take time they apparently didn't have. If Morin was telling the truth about Alara's condition, delay could be fatal. But trusting the doctor felt like stepping into a trap. Your friend, Kalen said. I want to meet them first. Alone. Fair enough, Morin agreed. But we should move soon. Those retrieval specialists won't stay lost in the nebula forever. Lyra pulled Kalen aside, her voice low. What do you think? I think we don't have many options, Kalen replied honestly. But I don't trust him. Neither do I, Lyra admitted. But he's right about Alara. She needs help that I can't provide. The episodes are getting worse. Kalen looked over at the child, who was watching them with those unervingly perceptive eyes. Despite her calm exterior, he noticed a slight tremor in her small hands, a sign of the strain her body was under. All right, he decided, but we go in prepared for trouble. They gathered the essential supplies from the rust bucket, including Kalen's weapons cache and the data Lyra had extracted from Ophidian's coil. Before leaving, Kalen activated the ship's security protocols and set up several traps that would trigger if anyone attempted to breach the hull. Dr. Morin led them through a network of mining tunnels that honeycomb the moon's surface. The passageways were cramped and dimly lit by patches of the same bioluminescent fungus that had grown on Ophidian's coil. Spores travel on ships and colonize compatible environments. Morin explained when Kalen commented on the similarity. They're remarkably adaptive. After nearly an hour of walking, they emerged onto a flat plain on the far side of the moon. A small ship was waiting, its sleek lines and polished hull a stark contrast to the rust bucket's utilitarian design. A Phantom-class courier, Kalen observed, impressed despite himself. Military grade. Those aren't easy to come by in the civilian sector. My friend has connections, Morin said. As they approached, the ship's boarding ramp extended and a figure appeared. A woman with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. She wore no uniform, but Kalen recognized military posture when he saw it. Commander Vance. The woman greeted him, using his old Alliance rank. It's been a while. Kalen tensed. Do I know you? We never met directly, she said. I'm Admiral Tessarif, former head of Alliance Intelligence, Outer Rim Division. Former? Kalen questioned, hand drifting toward his concealed weapon. I was relieved of duty when I started asking too many questions about Cassini Prime, Reeve explained. Official reason was early retirement due to stress. Unofficial reason was that I discovered links between Chimera Corporation and certain high-ranking Alliance officials. Kalen studied her, tried to recall what he knew about Alliance command structure from his military days. The name was familiar, though he'd never served directly under her. You were part of the tribunal that investigated the Cassini incident, he realized. You argued against my dishonorable discharge. Reeve nodded. I knew there was more to the story than what was in the official reports. By the time I pieced together enough evidence, it was too late to help you. And now you're helping fugitives, Kalen observed. I'm trying to right a wrong, Reeve corrected. The Alliance I served was supposed to protect people, not experiment on them or cover up corporate atrocities. She looked past him to Lyra and Alara. Dr. Kess. And this must be Alara. Lyra stepped forward cautiously. You know about us? I know you were listed as deceased in the Cassini Prime incident report, Reeve said. Eli has filled me in on some of the rest, though I suspect there's much he hasn't told me. She gave Morin a pointed look. Need to know basis, Morin said unapologetically. Reeve turned her attention back to Kalen. I understand your reluctance, Commander, but time is short, and this ship is our best chance of reaching Vega Minor undetected. Kalen looked from Reeve to Morin, then to Lyra and Alara. The child appeared paler than before, the tremor in her hands more pronounced. We don't have much choice, Lyra said quietly. We always have choices, Kalen replied. But sometimes they're all bad. He nodded to Reeve. Lead the way, Admiral. The interior of Reeve's ship was as impressive as its exterior, clean, efficient, with state-of-the-art systems that made the rust bucket look like the relic it was. Reeve showed them to a small but comfortable common area. We can reach Vega Minor in approximately 16 hours, she informed them. There are sleeping quarters aft if you need rest. Dr. Morin, I believe you wanted to examine the child. If that's acceptable, Morin said, looking to Lyra for permission. Lyra hesitated. I'll be present. Of course, Morin agreed. The medical bay is this way. As they departed, Kalen found himself alone with Reeve. The former admiral observed him with shrewd eyes. You have questions, she said. A few hundred, Kalen admitted. Starting with why a former Alliance admiral is risking everything to help fugitives from a powerful corporation. Reeve's expression darkened. Because Chimera isn't just a corporation, Commander. It's a cancer that's infected the Alliance from within. What happened at Cassini Prime wasn't an isolated incident. There have been other facilities, other projects, all with the same disregard for human rights and Alliance law. And what does Chimera get out of it? Advanced soldiers? Biological weapons? Power, Reeve said simply. They're trying to create the next evolution of humanity, one they control. Imagine an army of soldiers with Alara's abilities or corporate executives who can influence minds. The implications are staggering. And Morin? Where does he fit in all this? Eli was one of Chimera's top researchers until Cassini Prime. After the incident, he seemed to have a change of heart. He's been working from inside, gathering intelligence and sabotaging projects where he can. You trust him? Kalen asked skeptically. Trust is a luxury in our position, Reeve replied. But I believe his remorse is genuine, and his help has been invaluable. And me? Why involve me now? Reeve studied him for a moment. That wasn't my decision. Eli insisted we needed you, though he wouldn't say why. Something about your military background and personal connection to the case. Before Kalen could press further, the ship's engines hummed to life, and he felt the subtle shift in gravity as they lifted off from the moon's surface. "We should reach Vega Minor without incident," Reeves said, "but I suggest you get some rest. Something tells me you'll need it." Left alone, Kalen found himself drawn to the ship's viewport. The gas giant grew smaller as they accelerated away, its swirling storms a kaleidoscope of blues and greens against the blackness of space. Somewhere behind them, still lost in the Tartarus Nebula, the retrieval specialists would be hunting. Ahead lay Vega Minor and whatever awaited them there. After checking that the ship's course was as Reeve had claimed, Kalen made his way to the medical bay. Through the transparent partition, he could see Morin examining Ilera, who sat quietly on an examination table. Various holographic displays showed data he couldn't interpret: cellular structures, neural patterns, genetic sequences. Lyra stood nearby, her posture tense, watching every move the doctor made. Morin looked up and noticed Kalen. After a brief exchange with Lyra, he stepped out of the bay. "Her condition is progressing faster than I anticipated," Morin said without preamble. "The cellular degradation is accelerating, particularly in her neural pathways." "Can you help her?" Kalen asked. "With the equipment at Vega Minor, yes. I've developed a treatment that should stabilize the genetic modifications without suppressing her abilities entirely." Morin rubbed his eyes wearily. "But it will be close. And if it doesn't work?" Morin's expression was grim. "Then the next time she uses her abilities at full strength could be her last. The strain would cause cascading neural failure." "Does Lyra know?" "Yes, though I don't think she's fully accepted the implications yet." Kalen glanced through the partition at Ilera, who was now drawing something while Lyra watched. Despite her apparent calm, there was something deeply unsettling about a child so composed in the face of such danger. "There's something you're not telling us," Kalen said, turning back to Morin. "Something about why you wanted me specifically." Morin was silent for a long moment. "Your actions at Cassini Prime triggered the temporal displacement that protected Lyra and Ilera all these years," he said finally. "But there was more to it than that. The particular energy signature of the explosion you caused interacted with their genetic modifications in an unexpected way. It created a kind of bond." "What kind of bond?" Kalen asked, unease growing in the pit of his stomach. "A quantum entanglement at the cellular level," Morin explained. "In simple terms, your presence stabilizes their condition, particularly Ilera's." Kalen stared at him in disbelief. "You're saying I'm some kind of human medicine?" "More like a catalyst," Morin corrected. "The treatment I've developed requires specific genetic markers from the person who triggered the initial stabilization. From you. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Would you have agreed to come if I had?" Morin asked pointedly. "Besides, it's more complicated than just taking a blood sample. The process is invasive." Kalen felt a surge of anger. "So I'm not just the transport. I'm part of the experiment." "You're their best hope," Morin said quietly. "Without you, the treatment's chance of success drops significantly." Before Kalen could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Reeves' voice came over the comm system. "All hands to stations. We've been tracked." Kalen rushed to the bridge, followed closely by Morin. Reeve was at the controls, her expression tense as she studied the sensor readouts. "Chimera cruiser," she reported as they entered. "Military grade, heavily armed. They must have been waiting outside the nebula." "How did they find us?" Kalen demanded. "Unknown," Reeve said grimly. "But they're closing fast." On the tactical display, Kalen could see the pursuing vessel, a sleek, predatory shape advancing rapidly. Their own ship was fast, but the cruiser had both speed and firepower on its side. "Options?" he asked. "We could try to outrun them to Vega Minor," Reeve suggested. "But they'd be right behind us, and we'd lead them straight to the outpost." "Alternate destinations?" Moore inquired. Reeve considered. "There's an asteroid mining operation in the next system. Heavy traffic, lots of electromagnetic interference from the processing facilities. We might lose them there." "Do it," Kalen decided. Reeve adjusted their course, pushing the engines to maximum. The ship surged forward, stars blurring outside the viewport as they accelerated to near-light speeds. "They're still gaining," Morin noted, watching the tactical display. "Of course they are," Reeve said tensely. "That's a military pursuit vessel. This ship is fast, but it wasn't designed for combat." "What was it designed for?" Kalen asked. "Intelligence gathering," Reeve replied. "Stealth and speed, not confrontation." The ship shuddered as energy weapons fire from the cruiser grazed their aft shields. "Shields at 80%, Reeve reported. "Next hit will be closer." As if confirming her words, another blast struck them directly. The ship lurched violently, throwing them against the restraints of their seats. "Shields at 50%, Reeve called out. "Engine efficiency dropping." Lyra appeared at the bridge entrance, steadying herself against the bulkhead. "What's happening?" "We're being pursued," Kalen explained tersely. "Chimera cruiser." Lyra's face paled. "How did they find us?" Before anyone could respond, Alara appeared behind her mother. The child's face was calm, but her eyes were wide and alert. "They're tracking something on this ship," she said with uncanny certainty. Everyone froze, looking at each other in sudden suspicion. "There was no time for anyone to place a tracker on us," Kalen reasoned. "We came straight from the rust bucket to this ship. Unless—" Morin began, then stopped abruptly. His hand moved to his neck, feeling around until he found what he was looking for, a small, hard lump beneath the skin. "They tagged me," he whispered, horror dawning on his face. "Subcutaneous tracker." "When?" Reeve demanded. "I was detained briefly last month," Morin admitted. "Standard questioning," they said. "I didn't think." He broke off as the ship rocked from another hit. "Shields at 30%, Reeve announced. "We can't take much more of this." Kalen made a quick decision. "We need to remove that tracker. Now." "The medical bay has a surgical laser," Morin said. "But even if we remove it, they already know our general location." "One problem at a time," Kalen insisted. "Reeve, can you hold them off long enough for us to extract the tracker?" "I'll try," she promised, hands dancing across the controls as she implemented a series of evasive maneuvers. In the medical bay, Kalen helped prepare Morin for the impromptu surgery. Lyra, who had medical training as part of her research background, operated the surgical laser with practiced precision. "This will hurt," she warned, positioning the laser over the lump in Morin's neck. "Just do it," he gritted out. The procedure was quick, but brutal, with no time for proper anesthesia. Morin's face contorted in pain as Lyra cut into his flesh and extracted a tiny metallic object no larger than a grain of rice. "That's it?" Kalen asked, examining the bloody chip. "Advanced nanotechnology," Morin explained, pressing a bandage to his neck. "Probably monitors vital signs as well as location. They know exactly where I am and that I'm still alive." "Not for long," Kalen said, placing the tracker in a small containment unit from the medical supplies. "Alara, stay here with your mother. We'll be right back." He and Morin returned to the bridge, where Reeve was still engaged in the desperate game of cat and mouse with the pursuing cruiser. "Got it?" she asked without taking her eyes from the controls. "Yes," Kalen confirmed. "But they're still on us." "I have an idea," Morin said. "There's an unstable white dwarf in this sector, a dying star with intense gravitational fields. If we can get close enough to launch a shuttle with the tracker on board, the gravity well would pull it in," Reeve finished, "and hopefully make them think we've been destroyed." "Exactly," Morin nodded. "The radiation would mask our engine signature while we make our escape." "That's assuming they follow the tracker and not us," Kalen pointed out. "They will," Morin said confidently. "The tracker is programmed to mimic life signs. They'll think I'm on whatever vessel is carrying it." Reeve altered course again, setting a trajectory toward the coordinates Morin provided. The pursuing cruiser adjusted accordingly, still firing occasional shots that rocked their ship. "Shields at 15%, Reeve reported. "One more direct hit and we're exposed." The white dwarf appeared ahead, a blindingly bright pinpoint that grew larger as they approached. Even from a distance, Kalen could feel the pull of its gravity, subtle but insistent. "Preparing shuttle for launch," Morin announced, working at the auxiliary control panel. Are we seriously risking our lives on the hope that they'll fall for this? Kalen asked. You have a better idea? Morin shot back. Before Kalen could respond, the ship lurched violently as another energy blast struck them. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Shields are down, Reeve called out. Hull breach in Section 4. Sealing emergency bulkheads. Shuttle ready, Morin reported. Launch now, Reeve ordered. Morin activated the launch sequence, and a small shuttle separated from their ship, its automated systems guiding it on a trajectory that would take it dangerously close to the White Dwarf. Inside was the tracking device, still transmitting Morin's vital signs. Now comes the hard part, Reeve said grimly, adjusting their course to swing around the far side of the White Dwarf. If we time this right, the radiation burst from the star will mask our signature. If we time it wrong, we get pulled in ourselves, Kalen finished. Comforting, the ship shuddered as it fought against the increasing gravitational pull of the dying star. Through the viewport, Kalen could see the shuttle growing smaller as it followed its programmed course toward the White Dwarf. They're still following the shuttle, Morin reported, watching the tactical display. It's working. Don't celebrate yet, Reeve warned. We still need to break free of the gravity well. The engines strained as Reeve pushed them to their limits, the ship vibrating violently under the opposing forces of thrust and gravitational pull. For a moment, it seemed they were making no progress, caught in the deadly embrace of the White Dwarf. Then, gradually, they began to pull away. The blinding light of the star diminished behind them as they accelerated back into open space. We're clear, Reeve announced, relief evident in her voice. And the cruiser is still following the shuttle. On the tactical display, they watched as the shuttle was inexorably drawn toward the White Dwarf. The pursuing cruiser, realizing the danger too late, attempted to alter course but was caught in the same gravitational trap. Its more powerful engines gave it a fighting chance, but the maneuver would cost them precious time and distance. They'll break free eventually, Reeve said, but it gives us a head start. To where? Kalen asked. Vega Minor is compromised if they know Morin is involved. I have another facility, Morin said. A backup location on Pelorin. It's not as well equipped, but it should have what we need for the basic treatment. Reeve nodded, setting the new course. Pelorin it is. Estimated arrival time, 20 hours. Kalen left the bridge, needing to check on Lyra and Alara. He found them in the small common area, Alara curled up asleep on a bench while Lyra kept watch. She exhausted herself, Lyra explained quietly. The stress of the pursuit triggered an episode. She was able to sense the tracker somehow. That's how she knew. Kalen sat heavily on a chair opposite her. Morin says my presence helps stabilize her condition. Something about quantum entanglement from the Cassini incident. Lyra didn't seem surprised. I suspected as much. Since we found you, her episodes have been less severe. You knew. I theorized, Lyra corrected. The temporal displacement created unusual connections. Alara has always had a sense about you. Drawings, dreams, things she couldn't possibly know. Kalen looked at the sleeping child, so vulnerable in rest. Morin says I'm needed for the treatment to work. That it's invasive. It involves bone marrow extraction, Lyra admitted. Among other things, your genetic material contains markers that could help stabilize the modifications in Alara's DNA. And you're going to tell me this when? When I was certain we had no other options, Lyra said, meeting his gaze steadily. I won't force you, Kalen. But without the treatment, she dies, Kalen finished flatly. Lyra nodded silently, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Kalen sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been running for 7 years, he said quietly. From what happened at Cassini, from the Alliance, from any kind of connection or responsibility. And now I find out I'm literally bound to you and Alara at a cellular level. I'm sorry, Lyra whispered. I never meant to drag you into this. But you did, Kalen said, without rancor. And now we're all in it together. They sat in silence for a while, watching Alara sleep. Despite the circumstances, there was something peaceful about the moment. a brief respite in the eye of the storm. What happens after? Kaelin asked eventually. Assuming the treatment works and we survive Chimera's hunters. What then? I don't know, Lyra admitted. I've been running for so long. I never really thought beyond keeping her alive and safe. Not much of a life for a kid, Kaelin observed. Always on the run, always hiding. No, Lyra agreed softly. It isn't. Alara stirred in her sleep, her small face contorting briefly as if in pain or fear. Without thinking, Kaelin moved to sit beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Almost immediately, her features relaxed, and she settled back into peaceful slumber. See, Lyra said, you do help stabilize her. Kaelin didn't respond, but he didn't remove his hand either. Whatever connection existed between him and this strange child, he could no longer deny its reality. Whether it was the product of scientific accident or something more mysterious, he was part of her story now. And for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't looking for a way to run. The journey to Peloran passed in tense but uneventful hours. Reeve kept them on a erratic course, occasionally doubling back or making random jumps to confuse any potential pursuers. The ship itself needed repairs after the damage sustained during their escape, but the essential systems remained functional. Dr. Morin spent most of the time in the medical bay, preparing for the procedure that would supposedly save Ilara's life. Kaelin found himself avoiding the doctor, uncomfortable with the revelations about his involvement in the treatment. Instead, he helped Reeve with the ship's repairs and spent time with Ilara, who had recovered from her exhaustion but remained quieter than usual. The child rarely spoke, but when she did, her insights were unervingly perceptive. "You're afraid," she said to him at one point, as they sat together in the common area. "Of course I am," Kaelin replied honestly. "We're being hunted by a powerful corporation with military resources." Ilara shook her head. "Not of them. Of yourself." Before he could ask what she meant, the ship's intercom activated. "We're approaching Peloran," Reeve announced. "All hands to the bridge." Peloran appeared on the view screen as they gathered, a small, unremarkable planet with patchy cloud cover and vast oceans. Unlike the prosperous core worlds or even the developed rim colonies, Peloran showed few signs of extensive settlement from orbit. "We'll land at the Northern Polar Research Station," Morn explained. "Officially abandoned after a funding dispute 3 years ago. Unofficially, I've maintained it as a safe house." "And you're sure Chimera doesn't know about it?" Lyra asked skeptically. "As sure as I can be," Morn replied. "It was registered under a subsidiary of a subsidiary, and the paper trail was deliberately obscured." "That's not very reassuring," Kaelin muttered. "Nothing about our situation is reassuring, Commander," Reeve pointed out as she guided the ship into Peloran's atmosphere. "But it's the best option we have." The research station came into view as they descended, a cluster of low, dome-shaped buildings nestled in a valley between ice-covered mountains. No lights or signs of activity were visible, giving it the abandoned appearance it was supposed to have. Reeve set the ship down on a landing pad partly covered by drifting snow. The engines powered down, leaving them in silence. "Home sweet home," Morin said with grim humor. "At least until the treatment is complete." They disembarked cautiously, Kaelin taking point with his weapon drawn. The air was thin and bitingly cold, their breath forming clouds in front of them as they hurried toward the main building. Ilara pressed close to Lyra's side, wrapped in thermal blankets from a ship. Inside, the station was dark and cold, but functional. Morin activated the emergency power systems, bringing lights and heat online. The interior was sparse but clean, with basic living quarters, a small mess hall, and, most importantly, a well-equipped medical facility. "We should be safe here for a few days," Morin said, initiating the station's security protocols. "Long enough to complete the treatment and determine our next move." "And the treatment itself?" Kaelin asked. "How soon do we start?" "I need to run final diagnostics on the equipment," Morin replied. "But ideally, within the next 12 hours. Ilara's condition won't wait much longer." As if to emphasize his point, Ilara suddenly stumbled, a thin trickle of blood appearing from her nostril. Lyra caught her before she could fall, alarm clear on her face. "She's getting worse," Lyra said urgently. The episode on the ship accelerated the degradation. "Get her to the medical bay," Morin ordered. "I'll begin preparations immediately." Kalen watched as Lyra carried Alara away, followed closely by Dr. Morin. The child's face was pale, her strange eyes dulled with pain. Whatever his misgivings about Morin and his methods, it was clear that Alara needed help that apparently only he could provide. "I don't like this," he said quietly to Reeve, who had remained beside him. "Neither do I," the former admiral admitted. "But sometimes our choices are made for us by circumstance." "That's a fancy way of saying we're trapped." Reeve smiled thinly. "Indeed. I'll secure the perimeter and set up warning systems in case we have company. You should rest while you can. From what Eli has told me, the procedure will be demanding on your body as well." Left alone, Kalen wandered through the station, familiarizing himself with the layout, an old habit from his military days. The facility was larger than it appeared from outside, with multiple levels extending below ground. Most areas were sealed off to conserve power, but he found his way to an observation deck that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding mountains. Snow was falling heavily now, reducing visibility and covering their ship in a growing blanket of white. Good for concealment, he thought, but potentially problematic if they needed to make a quick departure. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Lyra approaching. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and tension evident in every line of her body. "How is she?" Kalen asked. "Stable, for now," Lyra replied, coming to stand beside him at the viewport. Morin gave her something to slow the degradation. "It will buy us a few hours." "And the procedure?" "He's preparing everything. It will begin at dawn." She hesitated. "It's not too late to back out, Kalen. We could find another way." "Is there another way?" he asked bluntly. Lyra's silence was answer enough. "Then there's nothing to discuss," Kalen said. "I'll do it." They stood in silence for a while, watching the snow fall. Despite everything, there was a strange peace to the moment, a temporary stillness in lives defined by constant motion and danger. "I never thanked you," Lyra said eventually, "for what you did at Cassini Prime. Even though you didn't know I survived, you tried to save us." "I didn't know what I was doing," Kalen admitted. "I just saw people being hurt and reacted." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Lyra said softly. One person refusing to look the other way. Before Kalen could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Reeve's voice came over the comm system. "Everyone to the security center. We have a situation." They found Reeve in a small room filled with monitoring equipment, her expression grave as she studied a series of displays. "What is it?" Kalen asked. "Orbital scan detected an incoming vessel," Reeve reported. "Signature match à Shimha Transport." "How do they find us?" Lyra demanded. "Unknown," Reeve said grimly. "But they'll be here within the hour." Dr. Morin rushed in, his face pale. "We need to evacuate." "No time," Reeve argued. "They'd catch us in the air. Our best option is to hide and hope they don't detect us under all this snow and the station shielding." "And if they do?" Kalen asked. "Then we fight," Reeve said simply. "I've activated the station's defensive systems. They're minimal, but might give us an edge." "What about Alara?" Lyra asked, fear evident in her voice. "She's too weak to move, and the procedure hasn't even begun. We have to start now," Morin decided. "It's our only chance. If we can complete at least the initial phase before they arrive, she might be stable enough to travel if we need to evacuate quickly." "Is that safe?" Kalen questioned. "No," Morin admitted, "but neither is doing nothing. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly." A tense silence fell as they all considered their options. Finally, Kalen spoke. "Do it," he said firmly. "Begin the procedure. Reeve and I will handle our uninvited guests if they get too close." "I'll help with the defense," Lyra added. "But I need to see Alara first." As they dispersed to their respective tasks, Kalen pulled Reeve aside. "How many do you think they sent?" "Standard retrieval team is 6 specialists," Reeve replied. "But given the high-value target, they might have doubled that." "Against the 4 of us," Kalen noted grimly. 3, Reeve corrected. "Morin will be occupied with the procedure, and you'll be part of it. I can fight, Kalen insisted. Not after they extract bone marrow from you, Reeve said firmly. You'll be in no condition. Lyra and I will handle the defense. Kalen wanted to argue, but knew she was right. If the procedure was as invasive as Morin had implied, he would be weakened, perhaps significantly. All right, he conceded, but I want a weapon within reach during the procedure. Just in case. Reeve nodded. Reasonable precaution. Now go. Time is running out. In the medical bay, Morin was already preparing the equipment while Lyra sat beside Alara's bed, speaking softly to the child. Alara looked even paler than before, her breathing shallow and labored. There you are, Morin said when Kalen entered. We need to begin immediately. What exactly does this involve? Kalen asked, eyeing the array of medical instruments laid out with growing apprehension. In simplest terms, we need to extract specific genetic material from you, primarily bone marrow and stem cells, process it, and introduce it to Alara's system, Morin explained, gesturing for Kalen to sit on an adjacent medical bed. The procedure is painful, but not life-threatening for you. And for her. Kalen nodded toward Alara. Morin's expression tightened. More risky. Her body might reject the introduced material, or the genetic modifications might overwhelm the stabilizing factors. But without intervention, she has no chance at all. Do what you have to do, Kalen said, removing his jacket and shirt. Lyra joined them, having said her goodbyes to Alara for now. I'll assist with the initial extraction, then join Reeve on defense. Are you sure you want to leave during the procedure? Morin asked. No, Lyra admitted. But I won't risk all our lives by leaving Reeve to face the retrieval team alone. She turned to Kalen, her expression softening. Thank you for doing this. Kalen merely nodded, unable to find the right words. After all they'd been through, the years of guilt and running, the shocking reunion, the desperate escape, they had arrived at this moment. Whatever happened next would change all their lives irrevocably. The extraction process was every bit as painful as Morin had warned. Despite local anesthesia, Kalen felt the deep, grinding ache as the doctor extracted marrow from his hip bones. The procedure seemed to last forever, sweat beading on his forehead as he gritted his teeth against the pain. Through it all, Alara watched him with those strange, knowing eyes. Despite her own suffering, she seemed more concerned with his discomfort. It will be over soon, she said softly at one point, when Morin paused to prepare the next extraction site. I'm fine, Kalen assured her, though they both knew it was a lie. You're brave, Alara countered. Like Mother said. Before Kalen could respond, the station shuddered slightly, and a distant boom echoed through the structure. They're here, Lyra said grimly, checking her weapon. I need to go. Be careful, Kalen called after her as she left. Almost done with the extraction, Morin announced, working with increased urgency. Then the processing begins. Outside the medical bay, the sounds of conflict grew louder. The distinctive crack of plasma weapons, the thud of explosions, shouted commands. Kalen strained to hear, tried to determine how the battle was progressing, but the thick walls of the medical facility muffled most sounds. Hold still, Morin instructed as he made the final extraction. This is the most critical sample. Kalen complied, fighting against the urge to leap from the bed and join the fight. His body felt weak, the multiple extraction sites throbbing with pain. He wouldn't be much use in combat now, he realized bitterly. There, Morin said with satisfaction, securing the final sample. Now for the processing and transfusion. He moved to a complex apparatus in the corner of the room, feeding the collected samples into various chambers. The machine hummed to life, displaying a series of rapidly changing data as it began manipulating the genetic material. How long? Kalen asked. 30 minutes for processing, Morin replied. Another 30 for the transfusion and initial stabilization. Assuming we have that long. As if in answer, the door to the medical bay slid open, and Reeve stumbled in. Blood streaked one side of her face, and she clutched her left arm, which hung at an unnatural angle. We've been breached, she reported grimly. Lyra is holding them at the south junction. But there are too many. 8 specialists at least, maybe more. Morin swore under his breath. The procedure isn't ready. We need at least 20 more minutes. We don't have 20 minutes, Reeve said, sealing the door behind her and activating additional security protocols. We barely have 5. Kalen forced himself to sit up, fighting against the wave of dizziness that threatened to overwhelm him. Give me a weapon. Reeve hesitated, then handed him her sidearm. You're in no condition to fight, Commander. Neither are you, he pointed out, nodding at her injured arm. Fair enough, she conceded with a grim smile. Alara suddenly gasped, her back arching as a seizure gripped her small body. Blood trickled from her nose and ears, and the medical monitors attached to her began wailing in alarm. She's crashing, Morin shouted, rushing to her side. The degradation is accelerating. We can't wait for the processing to complete. What are you saying? Kalen demanded. I need to attempt a direct transfusion, Morin explained hurriedly, already gathering new equipment. Unprocessed, unfiltered. It's dangerous for both of you, but it's her only chance. Do it, Kalen said without hesitation. Outside, the sounds of combat grew closer. An explosion rocked the station, powerful enough to make the lights flicker momentarily. That was the main generator, Reeve said grimly. We're on backup power now. How's Lyra? Kalen asked, wincing as Morin inserted a large-bore needle into his arm. Holding her own, Reeve replied. She's formidable. Somehow, that didn't surprise Kalen. Lyra had survived 15 years on the run, protecting her child from one of the most powerful organizations in known space. She was far more than the scientist he'd briefly known at Cassini Prime. Morin worked frantically, establishing a direct connection between Kalen and Alara. This would normally be filtered through specialized equipment, he explained tensely. Without that filtering, there's a risk of rejection, even toxic shock. You said this was her only chance, Kalen reminded him. It is, Morin confirmed. But you should know the risks. Just do it, Kalen insisted. The transfusion began, and Kalen felt a strange sensation as his blood, carrying the unique cellular markers that had somehow become entangled with Alara's, flowed directly into the child's system. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Alara remained unnaturally still, the seizure having subsided, but leaving her barely breathing. Then, her eyes flew open, their strange luminescence brighter than ever. She gasped, drawing in a deep breath as color flooded back into her pale cheeks. It's working, Morin said in disbelief. Her vitals are stabilizing. Before they could celebrate this small victory, the door to the medical bay exploded inward in a shower of metal and sparks. Through the smoke strode a figure in sleek black combat armor, a retrieval specialist, weapon raised and trained on Alara. Reeve reacted instantly, throwing herself between the specialist and the medical beds. The specialist fired, the plasma bolt catching Reeve squarely in the chest. She crumpled to the floor without a sound. Kalen raised his borrowed weapon, fighting against the weakness in his limbs. He managed to squeeze off 2 shots before the specialist returned fire, the plasma bolt searing past his shoulder close enough to burn. In the confined space of the medical bay, with Alara and Morin directly behind him, Kalen couldn't risk drawing more fire in their direction. Before the specialist could fire again, something unexpected happened. Alara sat up in bed, the transfusion tubes still connected to her arm, and fixed her gaze on the attacker. The specialist suddenly froze, weapon half raised, body rigid as if caught in an invisible grip. Enough, Alara said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible coming from child. The specialist's weapon clattered to the floor, and then, to Kalen's astonishment, the armored figure slowly sank to its knees. Blood began to seep from beneath the helmet, trickling from hidden nostrils or ears. Alara, stop! Lyra's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, bleeding from several wounds, but still on her feet, her own weapon trained on the incapacitated specialist. You'll kill yourself if you push too hard. The child's intense focus broke as she collapsed back onto the bed, breathing heavily. The specialist remained kneeling, trembling slightly but unable to move. The others? Morin asked urgently. Dealt with, Lyra said grimly. For now, but there will be more. We need to move. She crossed to Reeves' fallen form, checking for signs of life. Finding none, she closed the former admiral's eyes gently. She saved us all. The transfusion, Morin protested. It's not complete. Is it enough? Kalen asked, still feeling lightheaded from the blood loss and pain. Morin hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. It appears to have stabilized her immediate condition, but without the full treatment. Can it be completed elsewhere? Lyra pressed. Possibly, with the right equipment. Then we go, Lyra decided. Now, before reinforcements arrive. Disconnecting the transfusion tubes, Morin quickly applied pressure bandages to both Kalen's and Alara's arms. Lyra gathered essential medical supplies while Kalen forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly as he fought against dizziness. Can you walk? Lyra asked him. Do I have a choice? He replied with grim humor. Lyra's lips quirked in a brief smile. Not really. The kneeling specialist suddenly convulsed, then collapsed completely to the floor. Lyra approached cautiously, weapon ready, but the figure remained motionless. Dead? Kalen asked. No, Alara answered before Lyra could check. Sleeping, but not for long. Lyra looked at her daughter with a mixture of awe and concern. What did you do to them? Made them sleep, Alara said simply. Like they wanted to do to me. The implications of that power, the ability to render a trained, armored operative unconscious through thought alone, were staggering and terrifying. No wonder Chimera wanted her back so desperately. Let's go, Lyra said, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of her thoughts. Reeves' ship should still be operational. They made their way through the station, encountering the unconscious forms of several more specialists along the way. Some showed signs of conventional combat, plasma burns, physical trauma, but others simply lay where they had fallen, with no visible injuries. Your work? Kalen asked Alara, who was being carried by Morin. The child nodded tiredly. I didn't want to hurt them, but they wanted to hurt us. Outside, the snow had intensified, reducing visibility to mere meters. The cold hit Kalen like a physical blow, seeping into his weakened body and making his extraction sites throb with renewed pain. He stumbled, nearly falling, and felt Lyra's arm slide around his waist to support him. Almost there, she encouraged, guiding him toward the indistinct shape of Reeves' ship, barely visible through the swirling snow. They had almost reached the boarding ramp when a plasma bolt sizzled past them, striking the ship's hull with a shower of sparks. More followed, forcing them to dive for cover behind a snowdrift. More specialists, Lyra hissed, returning fire blindly into the storm. Must have been guarding the perimeter, pinned down, with Kalen barely conscious and Alara too exhausted to use her abilities again. Their situation looked grim. The specialists had them outgunned and surrounded, with only the storm providing any cover. Give us the child, a mechanically amplified voice called through the swirling snow. The rest of you may leave unharmed. Liar, Alara murmured, her voice faint but certain. We need a distraction, Lyra whispered, checking her weapon's charge. Something to get you to the ship while I hold them off. Not happening, Kalen said firmly, fighting through his weakness. We go together or not at all. Before Lyra could argue, a new sound cut through the howl of the storm, the distinctive roar of old but powerful engines. A familiar silhouette descended through the clouds, floodlights cutting through the snowfall to illuminate the area around them. The rust bucket, Kalen said in disbelief. The ship hovered above them, its weapons systems officially non-existent on a civilian salvage vessel, opening fire on the specialist positions. The surprise attack scattered their opponents, forcing them to seek their own cover. Moo! Lyra shouted, half-dragging Kalen toward Reeves' ship while Morin followed with Alara. They reached the boarding ramp just as it lowered, revealing a familiar figure silhouetted against the interior lights. Need a ride? Asked the newcomer, a weathered woman with a shock of white hair and a plasma rifle cradled casually in her arms. Mara Voss. Kalen identified her with surprise. What are you doing here? Saving your sorry hide, apparently, the salvage operator replied with a crooked grin. Again. Now get in before those corporate goons regroup. They hurried aboard, Mara covering their retreat with occasional bursts from her rifle. Once they were all inside, she sealed the hatch and moved swiftly to the cockpit. "Your ship," Kalen said, collapsing into a seat as Lyra checked his bandages. "How did you find it? How did you find us?" "Your ship found me," Mara called back as she initiated the launch sequence. "Got a distress signal keyed to my personal frequency. Arrived at the moon to find the rust bucket abandoned but operational. Onboard AI suggested you might be headed here." "I don't have an onboard AI," Kalen protested weakly. "You do now," Mara replied as the ship lifted off, accelerating rapidly away from the surface. "Courtesy of your little friend there, I'm guessing." All eyes turned to Alara, who managed a faint smile despite her exhaustion. "The ship was lonely," she said simply. "I gave it a friend." "You created an AI?" Morin asked, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his concern for their situation. "I woke it up," Alara corrected. "It was already there, sleeping." The implications were staggering, but there was no time to explore them. Mara guided Reeves' ship into the upper atmosphere, the rust bucket following close behind on automated controls. "Company," she called out as warning signals flashed across the console. "Chimera cruiser in orbit. They're powering weapons. Can we outrun them?" Lyra asked urgently. "Not in this ship," Mara replied grimly. "Maybe with the rust bucket, but the transfer would take too long. We'd be sitting ducks." "Then we fight," Kalen suggested, though he knew the ship's minimal weapons would be useless against a cruiser. "No," Alara said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. "I have an idea." Before anyone could stop her, she closed her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's communications system activated on its own, establishing a connection to the rust bucket. Through that link, they could hear a synthetic voice, presumably the AI Alara had awakened, acknowledging a series of commands. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked, alarmed. "Creating a diversion," Alara replied, her voice strained with effort. On the view screen, they watched as the rust bucket abruptly changed course, accelerating directly toward the Chimera cruiser. The cruiser's weapons locked onto the approaching vessel, preparing to destroy it. "No!" Kalen shouted, understanding Alara's plan. "That's my ship. It's empty." Alara reminded him as Mara used the distraction to guide their ship away in the opposite direction. "And it wants to help." The rust bucket dodged the first volley from the cruiser with surprising agility, closing the distance rapidly. At the last possible moment, just before impact, the salvage vessel executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for its bulk, a tight spiral that brought it alongside the cruiser rather than colliding with it. "What's happening?" Morin asked, peering at the view screen. "The AI," Alara explained, her voice fading as exhaustion overtook her again. "It's interfacing with the cruiser systems, creating confusion." Indeed, the cruiser seemed to hesitate, its weapons systems powering down unexpectedly. By the time they recovered, Mara had guided their ship behind Paloran's moon, breaking the cruiser's line of sight. "Jump coordinates set for the Vegas system," Mara announced, fingers flying across the controls. "Hang on." The stars stretched into lines as the ship accelerated to faster-than-light speed, leaving Paloran and the rust bucket behind. The sudden transition made Kalen's already unsettled stomach lurch, and he closed his eyes against a wave of nausea. "My ship," he murmured, feeling an unexpected sense of loss. The rust bucket had been more than just a vessel. It had been his home, his livelihood, his escape for 7 years. "I'm sorry," Alara said softly from her makeshift bed. "It was necessary." Kalen took a deep breath, then looked at the child who had turned his life upside down in the span of a few days. "I know," he said. "You did what you had to do." "So did you," she replied, a knowing look in her strange eyes. With the immediate danger behind them, Morin turned his attention back to Alara's condition. "The transfusion has stabilized her for now," he reported after examining her, "but she'll need continued treatment. The genetic modifications are still unstable." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked, fear evident in her voice. "It means we've bought time, but not a cure, Morn explained. Her condition will deteriorate again without regular treatments. From Kalen, Lyra concluded, yes, his genetic material contains stability factors that counteract the degradation. Without regular infusions. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood the implications. Alara's life would remain tied to Kalen's, perhaps indefinitely. Then I stay with her, Kalen said simply. Lyra looked at him in surprise. Kalen, you can't. I can, he interrupted. And I will. He glanced around at their small group. The fugitive scientist, the renegade doctor, the weary salvager, and the extraordinary child who connected them all. We stay together. It's safer that way anyway. And go where? Morin asked pragmatically. Chimera won't stop hunting us. The outer rim, Mara suggested from the cockpit. Beyond Alliance jurisdiction. There are places even Chimera can't reach. Is that where we're headed now? Lyra asked. Mara nodded. Vega's just a waypoint. From there, we can jump to the rim territories. I know people who can help us disappear. For how long? Morin wondered aloud. A month? A year? Forever? Chimera has too much at stake to simply let us go. Then we fight back, Kalen said firmly. We use what we've learned, what we've stolen from their databases. Find others like Alara. Build a network. Expose their operations. A resistance, Lyra said thoughtfully, against one of the most powerful corporations in known space. Why not? Kalen challenged. We've already done the impossible by escaping them this far. It will be dangerous, Morin cautioned. Life is dangerous, Kalen replied, especially for her. He nodded toward Alara, who was watching the exchange with interest despite her exhaustion. At least this way, she's fighting for something, not just running. Lyra studied him with an unreadable expression. You've changed, Kalen Vance. So have you, he countered. We all have. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the navigation console. Approaching Vega's system, Mara announced. We'll need to decide on our next jump point soon. The rim, Kalen confirmed, looking to the others for agreement. We go to the rim, establish a base, and plan our next move from there. One by one, they nodded. Even Morin, whose initial skepticism seemed to have given way to reluctant acceptance. Only Alara remained silent, watching them with those strange, luminescent eyes that seemed to see more than anyone should. What do you think, Alara? Kalen asked her directly. Is this the right path? The child considered the question with the seriousness of someone much older. Yes, she said finally, because we're together. That's what matters most. As they emerged from hyperspace into the Vega system, Kalen found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. 7 days ago, he had been a solitary salvager running from his past. Now, he was bound by blood and circumstance to a genetically modified child, her determined mother, and a mission that would likely get them all killed. And somehow, despite the pain, the danger, and the uncertain future that awaited them, he felt more alive than he had in years. The emptiness that had driven him to the edges of known space had been filled with purpose and with people who needed him as much as he, perhaps, needed them. As Mara applauded their jump to the outer rim, Kalen moved to sit beside Alara's makeshift bed. The child was drifting in and out of sleep, her small hand occasionally reaching out as if searching for something. Without hesitation, Kalen took it in his own. I'm here, he said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. Alara's eyes flickered open briefly. A small smile, touching her lips before sleep, claimed her again. Her hand remained firmly clasped in his, the physical connection mirroring the deeper bond that now linked their fates. Lyra joined them, sitting on Alara's other side. She trusts you, she observed. She barely knows me, Kalen pointed out. She knows you better than you think, Lyra replied. The connection goes both ways. She's been dreaming about you for years, the man who would come back for us someday. Kalen absorbed this with a mixture of wonder and discomfort. I don't know how to be what she needs. None of us do, Lyra said with a tired smile. We're making this up as we go along, but we're doing it together now. As the ship prepared for its jump to the outer rim, To new territories, new challenges, and perhaps new allies, Kalen found himself unexpectedly at peace with the path that lay before them. They were fugitives, yes, and targets of a powerful enemy. Their future was uncertain, their chances of ultimate success slim. But for the first time since the disaster at Cassini Prime, he wasn't running away from his past. He was running towards something. A future where a remarkable child might grow up free from those who would exploit her, where wrongs might be righted, and where the family he'd never expected to find could forge a life together, however unconventional. He looked down at Alara, sleeping peacefully now, her small hand still clasped in his. She had handed him more than just responsibility when she'd been thrust into his arms on Ophidion's coil. She had handed him redemption, purpose, connection, all the things he'd been unconsciously searching for in the vast emptiness of space. "You saved me years ago," Lyra had said, "and left me with this." Now, in a way he couldn't have imagined, Alara had saved him too.